Hello out there and welcome to the No Shit Cast. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. Tonight's guest is an author. The book, The Graves of the Golden Bear, Ancient Fortresses and Monuments of the Ohio Valley. His name is Rick Osmon. He'll be joining me on the show. I get this continual, interesting stream of amazing people that I've been meeting here recently. Thanks large part to Mr. Sherfu, Ramon Coriaga, who just keeps just throwing them over the wall at me here, and it's been awesome. So shout out there, Sherfu, appreciate it. But tonight's guest is really interesting in this book. I want to read you a little bit of the foreword of this book so you kind of get a sense for where and why I was so excited about having Rick on the show. The book asks a question: what if our history books are wrong and Columbus wasn't the first European to set foot in North America? The Graves of the Golden Bears will change some of your core historical beliefs. From the earliest maps of the Gulf of Mexico by the Spanish explorers to the beginning of the 20th century, claims were made that a Welsh prince named Madoc brought thousands of colonists to North America centuries before Columbus. Though those claims were debunked, the claimants denigrated, and much of the evidence was lost or destroyed, some deliberately, the story lives on. Through shrewd and thorough investigation, this book shows that there is high probability and substantial documentation that 4 different countries knew the stories were true. In general, even if errant in details, none of these countries, however, or governments are willing or are yet willing to acknowledge the truth of such a mass migration, and this book tells why. The author's on the phone with me here today. Rick, how are you doing this evening?
I am well, thank you. And you, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm living the dream, buddy. I get to do this. This is like I don't know, the icing on the cake. I get to talk to really cool and interesting people, but especially book authors and especially people who are out there challenging, I guess, norms and things like that. That really excites me, and that's why I was so glad that you were willing to come on here and talk to me about this, because you have gone out and done like exhaustive research and have done documentation to kind of support your premise. So take me through, just if you wouldn't mind, and just in a nutshell, sort of let's start at the 100,000 foot level. What is it that you're postulating here, and why is that, I guess, contentious?
Okay, that is 2 separate questions. I'll go with the first one. What am I postulating here?
Yep.
That there was not just one, not just the Welsh, but several ancient cultures reached the Americas, and vice versa. The Americans reached the ancient old world cultures too. But my premise is that I can zero in on a couple that for which there is sufficient evidence to at least consider it. Most historians won't even consider it. They think I'm right out there at the very edge, the fringe of history.
And why is that? Is it just because it's like an institutional bias based on what?
It's doctrine. It's not just a bias. It's truly doctrine. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. That is history. If it's not written, it's not history. Well, in this case, with the Welsh, it is written, but it's in a language and an alphabet that for which there are almost no living speakers/writers.
Okay.
In fact, that you could count on 2 hands the number of people who can spell and write in the Colburn alphabet. You can group a few 100,000 people who know a little bit of Cumana because they live in Wales.
So it's an ancient
English is
an ancient dialect.
Not the native language there.
Okay. So sort of like Gaelic would be, but even more obscure.
Yes, even more obscure than Gaelic. Wow. Yes. Thank you for bringing that one up. Latin, on the other hand, Latin as a language in the Latin alphabet, which is what we use with a couple of modifications, is pretty much universal. If you can read and write, if you work at an airport at any place on the planet, you have to know a little bit of the Latin alphabet.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, all the plane numbers, everything is in English, and all of the plane numbers and flight numbers use the English alphabet.
Okay. Yeah, I knew.
It's like
I knew that I thought I'd heard that before that every air traffic controller in the world speaks English, at least, right?
Yeah, at least yes, at least a little bit, enough to get his job done without letting planes collide or whatever.
Right. For directing air traffic, right? I don't know that they could
Yeah,
have a could explain their mom's recipe to you or something like that necessarily, right? So it's
right.
subject matter pertinent.
It certainly is that, and it extends into other professions and whatnot. But the real core of this is the English speakers of Great Britain are not the Welsh, and the English speakers, the Anglicans, the Saxons, all those people, they were not born and raised native to Britain. They were immigrants. Well, forceful immigrants. They were invaders. That's what they were.
Okay. A lot of that going on back then, right?
Well, yeah, some things never cease.
Yeah, right.
Um, so the Cymry language, or Cymry, depending on what part of Wales you're from, how you pronounce even the name of your language, is at least 1,800 years old. And the surviving examples of that language and alphabet carved in stone go back to at least the 4th century AD. You know, after the Romans had been there, after the Latin influence had taken root, they were still speaking Cymry and writing in Colbert alphabet.
Okay. And you're
So
saying
we go ahead.
so what you're saying that that the stuff was misinterpreted then.
Oh, it's
And
still denied as a real language or alphabet. The English denied that it ever existed as a real alphabet. Oh no, it's a 19th century invention.
huh.
It's, yeah, it's so far up there on the bovine excrement scale.
No, no, tell me how you really feel. Come on.
Yeah, pretty much. A friend of mine and a friend of Ramon's, his name is Lee Pennington, and he did a documentary film about the stolen history, the destroyed history of Wales. History and Bondage, I think, is the actual subtitle. And he did a very good job, and it documents research by two individuals in particular, Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett. And they researched this Prince Madoc and found out unequivocally, as far as I'm concerned, that he was a half brother to King Arthur II. And most people say, "Oh, King Arthur's a falsehood." All
Yeah.
the tales have him stretching out over almost 300 years. Well, what about Charles II or Henry VIII? Why couldn't there be two Arthurs?
Okay, makes sense. Sure.
Yeah. So we can go back and we can look at Arthur I, and Alan and Barham did exactly that as his entire lineage and followed it through to Arthur II, which was who was born, we think, in about 532 AD. And by 568 AD, and that's by the Gregorian calendar, not the Julian calendar, the one they used at the time. And in fact, Wales had its own calendar too. And there's a fudge factor in the number of years. We don't really have time to go into all that right now, but Arthur II would have been here, not just here on Earth, but here in Midwestern United States in about 570 AD. And in fact, he would have died here at that time. That's both in the Chronicles of Wales, the Chronicles of Kings of Wales. And it's not part of the Bible, but it probably ought to be. And separate records from other parts of Europe, in the middle of that so-called Dark Ages, people were still writing. The Dark Ages had nothing to do with the level of education or literacy within the continent. It had everything to do with the skies being dark. It was the Dark Ages. And it followed some kind of event, whether volcanic or extraterrestrial impact or whatever, that darkened the entire northern hemisphere.
So
And that event, go ahead.
so wait. So we made there's not just one. Okay, first of all, there actually was a King Arthur. Now, forgive my literary ignorance here, okay? Because when I read the stories of King Arthur, they were fiction, fantasy type fiction stuff, right? Or
Yeah.
as the way I understood it. So you're saying that there was a King Arthur, and there was also a King Arthur the second.
Correct.
And what your book says is that that second King Arthur actually made it to the what we call today the United States, and is buried here.
Not anymore. He was buried here.
Okay, go ahead. I just want to make sure okay. Go ahead.
Well, that gets to the actual title of the book, Graves, plural, of the Golden Bear. And Golden Bear was his nickname. So
Okay.
I want to call it that. Richard the Lionhearted, Arthur the Golden Bear. Anyway, um, yeah, he was killed in a battle. We think in on Lookout Mountain, actually, and he was buried for two. He was interred, would be the more correct word, in a burial cyst in a cave in extreme northeastern Alabama. And I've been there. There is a burial cyst in that cave. It fits the description pretty well, in fact, to a T. Um, with a whole bunch of other things going on that, again, we don't really have time to go into all of it. But Lee was along. This was Lee's trip. He wasn't along. It was his trip, and I was there to assist him. But the
Okay.
things we found there were amazing and well, kind of life changing for me, I guess.
So
Um,
I want to throw a lasso around this right here, if you wouldn't mind, okay? Because because I wanted to put that out there, because now I want to say this, that if your book, the forward to your book, is actually written by Scott Wolter, who is
correct.
the archaeologist that hosts that show America Unearthed. He did the Hooked X stuff and found out that, and I think unequivocally proved that there were other people that came to the United States and even explored a vast majority of it way before Christopher Columbus came. I mean, I think the Hooked X, that was Scandinavian, or no, Vikings, right?
Well,
Um,
Scandinavian would be more accurate
More
term
accurate.
because
Okay, so what
okay. Let me also go into this. Scott is a geologist. He deals
geologist? That's right.
yeah,
Yep.
he deals in hard science. This is not a humanities project for him. He's a hard science guy, and he likes to check all the boxes.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep, that's what I like about him. Is he goes back and he backs everything up and cross checks everything two, three, four different ways.
Well, and if you're in real research, you have to do that, or you can't trust your own results. And it's in any hard science, that's true. You have an engineering background, you told me,
Yep.
so you can understand the value of an elegant engineering solution. It doesn't just do the job; it does the job elegantly.
Yep. Yes.
That's what real science research does. It doesn't just get an answer; it gets an answer that everybody likes.
So this is
So
something so that's what I wanted to say. I mean, so yeah, this is making some claims, but then again, so to get Scott Walter to write your forward, there's got to be some data that you're putting behind this, and that's what I love. Is I think what you're doing here is sort of bending a paradigm, and I just want to make sure that the guests understand, or the listeners understand, that this is stuff that you've come up with, that you've done some, as the book title or the forward says, done some exhaustive research on as well. Correct?
yes, now that doesn't mean I found all these answers myself, but I found where they exist. And like I said, Allen, Wilson, and Baron Blackett, they did all that stuff. A few other folks have come along and said, I think they're right, and I'm one of those folks.
Okay. So you're
Uh,
as any good researcher, you're standing on the research of your fellow researchers and people before you as well. Is what you're
yes,
saying here?
right. And I'm taking all that information and I'm trying to synthesize something out of it that allows me to sell it to everybody, if that makes any sense at all.
Okay. Are you saying that in the sense that put it in
C-
easy to?
Convince everybody.
Oh,
Let me
okay,
let me
okay.
rephrase that. Yeah, yeah. Book sales are not going to make anybody rich unless you're like Tom Clancy or somebody. Um,
Isn't that the truth?
the yeah, sad but true. The the idea is that there have been these claims, not by me, but by everybody who came before me, that uh, hither and yon and then and there and everybody you can think of made it to America. My contention, my first synthesis is, why couldn't they go from America to the old world? And I'm pretty sure they did, because we've got enough records in the old world to say these strangers showed up. They looked like this, and they had boats like this. and they brought these strange goods. So what are you going to do? You're going to say that the natives couldn't sail? The natives, when Columbus got to Cuba, actually before he even got to Cuba, he got to Santo Domingo, and the Carib tribesmen came out to meet his ships in 100-foot long seagoing canoes, and they were 7 feet tall each. And he was amazed with their appearance and their endurance and their 100-foot long canoe. You understand that's longer than his ships were.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, the old sailing vessels and stuff. And I think, I mean, if you've been paying attention at all, no one can honestly say that Columbus was the first European or old worlder to set foot in the Americas. I mean, that's long since gone, right? I mean, just the stuff that's going on at Oak Island up in Nova Scotia, I think, right, is enough to let you know that that's not the case. There were people here way before that.
Well, there were, yeah, thousands of years, perhaps tens of
I mean,
thousands of years. There,
and that's
just
putting
as an
aside how
just,
you
just
discover a
as an
country.
aside,
Yeah, yeah.
just as one aside, we have been under the influence of academia saying that Clovis was first since 1936.
Yes.
13,000 years ago, 12,900 years ago, whatever you want to say it. There were these people that showed up. They had this technology. They spread across the continent in 2 years, both continents in 2 years. And then they suddenly disappeared. Then all of a sudden we get this news story just the last few days about a mammoth skeleton that was found in the San Diego area, and it was actually found many years ago, like 1961, I think it was. I'd have to look that part up. But it wasn't until 1994 that the scientists started doing some of these tests on it to find out its age. And then it's taken since then to get a consensus on just how old these bones are, because these bones were in association with human-made tools, and they had tool marks on these bones. The bones are way too old to get a carbon-14 date, which means they're older than 50,000 years. That's just the starting point, though. The other thorium, uranium, a couple other different tests that they ran on them all came up with ages in excess of 100,000 years. Well, wow.
Yeah.
Somebody either walked a long ways 100,000 years ago, and by the way, that's at 130,000 years, which is the latest date for these bones. That's before humans were supposed to have left Africa.
Right.
There's something wrong with our system.
I always thought it was funny that we credited this guy with finding America, but when he showed up here, there was already people here. It's like, how the hell do you discover someplace that there's already people? It's like that was always presumptuous for me.
Have you ever seen an image of Columbus on his ship, and what does he have in his hand?
Boy, you're asking me a good question there. If I was a good student, the answer to that would be no. So no, I can't think of if I've ever
assure
seen.
You've seen it, but it didn't register that he was holding a map.
Oh, yeah. Where did that come from? Right.
Precisely.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's not just a chart. He sailed the coastline of Europe for years before he ever decided to go west. He hauled fish from Norway all the way to the eastern end of the Med, dried fish, and including some salmon and cod that had to have come from the outer banks of Canada.
So he was a privateer, right?
No, not technically. No, he was not a privateer. Privateer has a letter of writ from a government to attack other ships from other governments. That's what a privateer is.
Okay, that's my misunderstanding.
It's a pirate license. That's what it is.
I thought they were like just people that didn't actually sail a flag for any particular country and went out. But I guess
he sailed for the Hanseatic League, and it was a group of basically it was a religious order, survivors of the Templars by some accounts. I don't know that I buy into that one just yet, but they bought fish and other goods in Scandinavia, distributed them all the way through the Med to the eastern end of the Med, all the way to what we call Israel today, and goods from there, including magnesium sulfate from the desert, went
Right.
back up into Scandinavia and made stops all along the way.
So,
All the little islands, every country along the coast.
so somewhere along the way, he came up with these charts that he then used to. Now he sailed for Spain. He was a Span for Spain, right?
He was
When he came to this, yeah.
supposedly he was Genoese by birth. He was from Genoa, Italy, supposedly. There's some question even on that. His father-in-law was Portuguese and a member of the Knights of Christ, an organization that was a descendant of the Knights Templar.
Okay.
So he may have come into possession of, well, those maps.
Oh,
You
I
know,
understand. Okay. Yeah, because there's a whole back channel connection between the Knights Templar possibly and North America, especially like the coast of Canada, right?
yeah, at least that is why the show The Curse of Oak Island exists. It took them, what, 5 years to get to that point, but yes, that's why that show exists.
Sure. Sure. Which is just a whole nother fascinating sort of caveat to sort of where you're plugging in here, which would have been around those same time periods?
For King Arthur II, no,
No,
it
it would
would
have
have been
been
570 AD. It would have been 500, 600, almost 700 years earlier.
before. Okay. And
Yeah,
now this ties in. Now it says this Welsh prince named Madoc brought thousands of colonists to North America. So this, is there a connection between this Madoc character or this person and
yes,
okay,
that's where we left off when I was talking about the extraterrestrial impact or volcano, whatever it was, caused the Dark Ages.
right,
It
right,
also it also caused some really bad sailing weather when Prince Madoc was also the admiral of the Welsh Navy and at sea when this hit.
okay,
So he and his entire fleet were swept far to the west, and it took him 10 years to A, survive, B, rebuild a fleet, and C, get the remnants and survivors back to Britain.
that's
And
a
when he got there, he found out that Britain and, well, Ireland and, well, most of Scandinavia, France, Spain, they were all suffering from this Dark Ages thing that had, caused plagues and whatnot, not plagues, famines and whatnot, because it killed all the crops and diseases as a result of whatever it was that was in the air.
okay,
So this is the only time in history that Brit history up to that point that Britain had tried to import wheat. They had always been an exporter of wheat. So whatever this was caused a famine that was nearly continental wide. And here comes Prince Madoc with his survivors and his ships. He says, "You'll never guess what I found. Hey, it's green over there, and there's almost no people, and we could take a colony over there and survive at least until this place gets back on its feet." And the council, probably around some big round table, I don't know, decided this was a great idea. And they went looking for that holy grail of survival in North America. Now you can take the entire Percival tales, all that stuff,
right,
and you can do what you wish with them. You can run them through a grinder for all I care.
okay,
They're not history; they're romance. Now, was there a holy grail involved, some cup of Christ or bloodline or whatever? I don't know. I'm trying to deal with facts for now. We'll
okay,
get to that part later
okay,
as a maybe. So we have this group of people, large group of people apparently, and some of their animals and a lot of their tools and their ships and their customs and their songs and their weaving and pottery, everything. And we go far to the west, and we end up in, well, according to some tales, if you got to page 3, Mobile, Alabama, and worked their way up the Mobile River into the Tennessee River Valley and finally the Ohio River Valley, and pretty much on top of where you and I live.
okay,
You're at one end, I'm at the other.
right, right,
So the local tale around the falls of the Ohio, which is the only place on the Ohio River that you had to portage in ancient times. And there was a massacre there, according to Indian Native American lore on a place called Sand Island, which does not exist anymore because the Ohio River was dammed there at the falls. Anyway, Sand Island by 1800 was allegedly still by remaining there by 1800. It was waist deep in human bones, and it was about 3.5 acres.
Wow.
So how many people were there for that?
It's a lot of dead
massacre?
people. Yeah.
Yeah. It did not include Prince Madoc or King Arthur. Prince Madoc survived. King Arthur died elsewhere.
Okay.
Now, getting back to the caves in northeastern Alabama, they're called the Welsh Caves. Nobody could tell us why. That's why Lee wanted to go there.
That's sort of obvious, isn't it?
Yeah. So we get there, and yes, there's a burial cyst, and it's the right size, and it is powder dry in this thing. We're talking Alabama, where there's 110 inches of rainfall a year or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's swampy.
Not in this part. It's mountainous in this part. It is one spur of Lookout Mountain, to be honest. It's the southernmost spur of Lookout Mountain is actually in Alabama, not Tennessee. So there is this cyst, and there's this crack in the rock. There's a big cliff. It's 180 feet above the creek bed below. And the caves entrances are like 30 feet below the edge of the cliff. And it's a dangerous descent. There's a footpath you can go around about, a quarter of a mile on an 18-inch wide path, 150 feet above the creek. And that's what we did. And at that time, I believe Lee was 70, maybe 71. He was fairly much recovered from his first heart surgery, and he needed a little bit of assistance. And he'd been told that he could never get down there. And I told him, "You want down there? We'll get you down there." And we did. And it was a great day and a few interesting discoveries. One of them, a group of them that is of particular interest, beyond the burial cyst cave. It's a series of 5 caves in the side of this cliff. Beyond the burial cyst cave is another cave where there is, I'll call it modern graffiti, dated 1863 during the Civil War. This was a great lookout point for anything moving in the valley below.
Okay.
So somebody got bored looking out and carved initials and USC 1863.
It's kind of like
And it looked, go ahead.
it's kind of like the guys putting Kilroy in the airplanes and stuff in World War II and things like that, right? It was just something that soldiers kind of do when they're bored.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that one later, but yes, that's right.
Okay.
But the real sentient point about this one is it looks like it was carved today because it's protected. There's no erosion to this particular piece of graffiti. Now, over the cave where the burial cyst is another emblem, different alphabet, I guess you'd have to say, different symbology. And it looks like an A, but the center bar is not straight across. It goes down, and it has a tail on it, making it a Y. Pardon me. Another place, this is found in a lot of places, this particular symbol, but notoriously, it was found at a place called Tintagel in Cornwall, England. And this is the place where lore says, English lore and Welsh lore and Arthur lore says that Arthur the First was conceived when Uther got Merlin to feed this particular queen some kind of spell that made her think that Arthur was her now dead husband because Arthur had just killed him. Wonder where Shakespeare got that whole Hamlet thing. Anyway, so Arthur the First would have grown up there, at least in toddlerhood, before he became King of Wales. But this would also mean he was King of Cornwall and Wales because, well, he was bastard son. Anyway, um, so in 1964, a genuine archaeological excavation at Tintagel came up with this piece of slate that had Artorias scribbled across it in like 3-year-old hand. This was a toddler learning to write his name.
Okay.
And that A matches the one in northeastern Alabama, with the exception of that vertical leg on that center bar. And my contention is it became a ligature of Arthur's dead and buried here, or Arthur's gone to heaven and he's buried here. I don't know exactly what it means, but I'm pretty sure there's a connection there. Another place that particular symbol shows up, surprised me a lot, is in the what do they call it, modified Egyptian, or I forget exactly what Joseph Smith called it, the Egyptian alphabet that Joseph Smith interpreted for the Book of Mormon. It's
Okay.
in there.
I was going to touch
So,
on that too, because if is this in any way connected to the story from the Book of Mormon about?
well, I went down that path. I did. I went down that path. Is there an answer to that? Yes and no. There's not a hard answer that says the Book of Mormon came from this story, or the Book of Mormon, some got part of it from this story, or anything like that. I can't find it. And I've got some friends and colleagues who are very well versed, no pun intended, in the Book of Mormon. They can't find it either. But the Reformed Egyptian, that's what he called it. There is another text from roughly the same time, actually slightly before Joseph Smith,
Okay.
that talked about a Roman officer who was, I'm not sure what the right word would be, whether he escaped and evaded and became part of the native culture, or um, whether he deserted and became part of it. Not sure. That's what this story tells, is this Roman officer who was somehow took over a big part of, and actually became a king within the native cultures. And that took me down another path. Did Romans actually make it to America?
Well,
And,
I
and
just saw that episode of Oak Island, as a matter of fact, and yeah, so go ahead.
so I believe so. Yes, I do believe they did. And not only it wasn't just a few, it was the entire Ninth Legion and all their camp followers, from what I can tell. And they disappeared from, I should put it this way, because I don't know if there's an intermediate staging area, but they disappeared from York, England in 117 AD. There's no record of the Ninth Legion existing after that point. So that would have been at the time that Hadrian had just become the emperor of Rome. And he built, or had built, Hadrian's Wall across the northern end of England to keep the Picts at bay. Well, that's not what it was for at all. It wasn't even a defensive wall, kind of like the one we're trying to build here. It's not meant for military defense. It was meant to regulate trade and traffic. That's what the Romans did so well. They regulated trade and traffic. And then, just a few years later, there was this one guy by the name of Lucius Aemilius Carus, and he had been a minor in that Ninth Legion that disappeared in 117. Suddenly, he was elevated to the position of governor. Roman governor was a very well-paid position, and his governance lands was a place called Arabia Petraeus. We know it as the city of Petra, or the ruins of the city of Petra. You've seen it. It is the facade that is shown in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Right.
That building is called the Roman Treasury. Now, that carving, it's not really a built building. It's not a constructed site. It's a carved out a living rock site. And pre-existed the Roman occupation. And that area, that territory was captured by Hadrian's predecessor, Trajan. And that was the one capture of Trajan's that Hadrian kept. The rest of them he let go back to their original governances. But that one he kept. Why would he do that? Very simply, because that little narrow path that runs through there that you saw in that movie, it's very real, and it is the Silk Road. That is the exact route that Marco Polo and his father Niccolo Polo would have done on the outbound journey to go to China.
So this was a pinch point that if you controlled it, you sort of controlled trade. So it was so it was probably a very contested area too, I would imagine.
Not once the Romans got it. No, they held it for the duration of the Roman Empire, and then the Byzantines took it over for a while. Then it reverted to, well, now back to Jordan King, but for 3,000 or 4,000 years, it was a pinch point where you could charge a toll if you want to go through here, or if you want to have a drink of water, you're going to pay for it. Because that is a very arid desert region. Yes, it's all carved out by water, but that was a long, long time ago.
Right.
So we have this Roman presence in Jordan or Petra, 20 odd years after it was supposed to not exist. This person disappeared from history, and there he is. And a governor's position is not something you got for being efficient or a nice guy or any of that stuff.
No. Or a nobody for that matter either, right?
Or a nobody, right? Which he was when he was in the Ninth Legion. So something in that intervening time made him important, valuable to the empire, because Hadrian was gone by 145. My contention is he learned how to do pinch points, and he did it in North America. So now we get into the fortresses of the Ohio Valley. Most of them, and I concentrate on the stone fortresses because there were, most people think the Indians did not build with stone. Well, guess what? They did. The mounds, many of the mounds have stone structures underneath all that dirt. And the fortresses that they built, dozens, maybe hundreds of them, were built with stone at least as a fascia, because, well, you couldn't dig it out very easily. And if you threw fire at it, it just kind of sat there and,
burned out, right? Yeah.
They also built wood palisades. That was usually an outer defense. Cahokia had 3 different levels of palisades around the Central Mound complex, I should say. And it was, it's been 20 years since somebody said, hey, there were a lot of people lived here. But now they're getting to the point of there may have been hundreds of thousands of people living at Cahokia.
Right.
At a time when London had 1,000 people.
Well, that's one of the things that's been blowing my mind as a segue, but I don't want to take you off topic, is the I think it's called laser interferometry that they're using in South America and exposing
LiDAR. Yeah, it is a version of laser interferometry.
And they're exposing these massive, not only cities, but like roads, like highway level trade roads and stuff. So yeah, there was a point in time where in the Americas I think there was a significant amount more people here than I think we think there was, or we sort of imagine that there was, right? Because of the way we're taught history growing up.
Well, yeah, we were also taught that nobody made it to America. So if one of those dominoes falls, the entire thing falls. So thank you for that segue, though. Let me explain. The LiDAR is revealing that, particularly in the Yucatan and Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, even on down into Ecuador, where the geography allowed it, these cities were set up on about 10 mile grids, 10 modern statute mile grids. And I could not figure out why they would do that until I realized that they had a communications network that was used using line of sight, bouncing light back and forth to send signals. Because every one of those big Mayan cities had an observatory, right?
Yeah, they like to build up. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
they did. Not only did they like to build up, but they built this building with this. Generally, it had 3 levels on top of the big platform, and the upper level had slot windows in it that were vertical slots, not horizontal slots. They're vertical slots. And when you get to figuring out, when you plot the course of looking out that slot, it's looking at the next city. So the only reason to do that is to be observing whether a guy's sending you a signal.
Like distress or whatever. Who knows what they
No,
used it
no,
for,
it
but
was much. It's like
yeah.
text messaging. Okay, it was sophisticated. They had a language. They had an alphabet.
Yeah, they did. Yep, for sure.
In that case, it wasn't an alphabet the way we think of it, though. It was a syllabic alphabet. Each symbol represented a syllable in their language, and that's not unusual. It's not even unique to North America or the Americas. However, it is hard for most modern people to wrap their head around. The French, going back to the 18th century, actually going back to the early 17th century, had a cipher system, used for military and diplomatic dispatches, that was also based on syllabic coding. So if this series of numerals from 1 to whatever represented a specific, each numeral represented a specific syllable in the French language, if you didn't have the key, you'd never figure it out. In fact, it still hadn't been figured out unless you had the key. That was introduced to the Americas by Lafayette to help Jefferson and company conduct their revolution against the English crown. I did whole chapters about this. But where they learned this, where the French learned this, may have been in the Americas. I can't prove that part. I'll just tell you right up front, I can't prove it.
You saying that there's a logical path that just some of the dots are missing kind of thing though? It makes sense that it went that way?
Yes, it makes sense that it went that way. And it's not just that the dots are missing, it's when the dots had to exist.
There's a lot in research that works this way, right? I mean, this is pretty common. You have to kind of look at the big picture and then try to figure out, well, I think the road went this direction. And if
Yeah,
I go down this road and I find these things, then I know that this is the right direction per se, right? So that's kind of what you do is you put together this um, hypothesis, and then you go out and work your way through that path to find the evidence that supports it, right?
right. Well, we also know that there was an analog in the old world, many analogs, but the one that is best described historically is a Roman system, and it was written down by a guy by the name of Polybius, who wrote, quote,
Okay.
the histories of Rome, unquote. He was not Roman, he was Greek by birth. However, he spent 17 of his first 31 years as a hostage to Rome in a Roman house, a Roman high elite house,
Okay.
incidentally. And he is the only survivor, or witness would be the better word, to the fall of Carthage, who wrote about it as an eyewitness, not as a Roman, as just an eyewitness. And he talked about how the Romans sent signals back and forth to conduct their siege, and how the Carthaginians were sending signals out, but even the Romans couldn't figure out who they were sending them to. But we have a blow by blow, a keystroke by keystroke description, if you will, by Polybius of how the Romans sent their signals over a path of light, line of sight, day or night. And it represented either the Latin alphabet or it represented his own Greek alphabet. And it was interchangeable. And that was part of their ciphering, part of their, not just the ciphering, but their um, signal security is, I guess, would be the right
So
word.
it probably had a lot in common to do with like a visual version of Morse code then, or something to that effect, right? Where certain amounts of flashes or They probably
Yeah,
open and
well,
close something like they
very
do in the Navy.
specifically, and this goes into a later lesson, if you will. They took their 20, in the case of the Romans, their 24 character alphabet, which later became a 25 character. Ours is 26, incidentally. But they took their 24 character alphabet and they divided it into 5 rows and 5 columns. And let's say the letter A was 1 1. Okay.
Okay.
And it was only in the later years when their Y existed. So it would have been what, 4 5 or 5 4, depending on which way you want to do rows or columns first. So you can say 2 3 2 4, and I just told you hi.
Makes sense. Very, very efficient to do it that way
It
too.
is, and it's very simple to understand. Now, if you want
Yeah, it
to
wouldn't be
cipher
much.
it so
It'd
the
be
enemy
very
doesn't
easy.
know how to read it,
Anybody could learn that, right? Because it's just count the numbers and that's the letter in the alphabet and start writing them
correct?
down. So the training for that would be if you already know how to read this language, you know how to do this cipher too, or this code that you're sending.
Correct. Yes, that is the simplest part of the entire system. More, I won't even say more difficult, more technically involved is how do you maintain that line of sight and not get distracted on something else? Or how do you get the signal through an obscured atmosphere? Or, all those technical things that can enter into
Sure.
interference.
Yep. Yeah, there would have to be
Um,
somebody watching it constantly to make sure that
correct.
somebody wasn't sending a message.
Right. And yet in Central America, we have dozens, maybe hundreds of sites that were set up, in my opinion, to do exactly that. And I can show you a few in North America that were like that too. Newark, Ohio was one of those, but it wasn't a big tall tower. It was set up on a dome, in that case a salt dome, we think, and berms were built around the central port so that the observer was only looking in a very specific direction out of whatever it is, 8 different ports. So it was restricted your line of sight so you wouldn't be distracted by the other things so much. Further, and I can show a number of artifacts that seem to fulfill this role. If you have a pipe and you look through the pipe and you're obscuring everything outside of that line of sight through that pipe, look through a big drinking straw and you get the effect. It does not magnify whatever's out there that you're looking at, but it does keep you from being distracted by anything else. Now, if you take that drinking straw and you mount it to something, it's always going to be looking at the source that is your area of regard. Now, I got onto this one in one of my former lives. I was working for the U.S. Navy. I got my paycheck from the Navy. I was doing the work for U.S. SOCOM, but we were on a Marine Corps base. Okay, in Yuma, Arizona. And the small arms range out there had an impact point that was, in that case, I believe it was right at 3/4 of a mile from the firing line. And the observer looked through literally a piece of 3/4 inch pipe. It was about, right at 4 feet 9 inches off the ground, eye height. You had to bend over a little if you're a tall guy. But it only saw the impact zone. Anything that impacted outside the zone was a miss, and they didn't care how much or where. It's a hit or a miss, just like all these signals. It's a hit or it's a miss. There are no near misses, there are no almost or anything. If it's a dropped character, then you have to feed back, hey, I dropped a character. Or you have to be able to infer what that character was. So it is not an asynchronous system. It has to be a synchronous system. Somehow they had to feed back to the source that they got it all, or they got it right.
Yeah, there would be
Make
a
sense?
start characters and stop characters. Just like that's probably
Yeah.
exactly because that's what they do with that. They used to do with that. Boy, this is obscure, but ASCII. When
Yes,
you were
exactly.
sending messages through a telephone line, you had to tip and ring. You had to like tell it to pick up pick up the line, you know, and then you had to
Right.
say, okay, I'm sending out, and then you had to wait until the guy on the other end went, yeah, I can hear you. You know, there was a communication that happened. Then you send the message. So
Well,
it,
yeah. Yeah. If the other thing is, if you in ASCII you took a hexadecimal code to represent a character of an alphabet.
correct. Yep.
So you had a base 16 counting system, which took me a while to get onto how you do that, how you do math with it at least.
If you're like
But
me, you just convert it to decimal and then convert it back. That's how I do it.
yeah, exactly. Me too. That's the only way I can do it. Once upon a time, I had my head wrapped around it, but now I have to unwrap it. Now I have to rewrap my head around a base 20 counting system, which is what all the Central American counting systems were.
Okay.
Now, we have a clue or two because the Cherokee, who invented their own syllabic alphabet and used it even to publish newspapers, um, they had a system where a specific syllable of their language could mean, and did mean, not just could, did mean a color of the spectrum, a numeral within their counting system, which apparently went up to 20 before the white men got here. And it also had, as a single syllable, it had a meaning of something within their world. The Maya did too. For instance, and we've got a small sample of what we are pretty sure is true. We had the word Ka or Khan, not the Wrath of Khan, not Star Trek. No. Khan being a king. We will go with that. It may not be an exact interpretation, but it's as close as we'll get. It could also mean a jaguar, which is how it's usually interpreted by the archaeologists who can't wrap their head around even the ancient Mayans having a kingly system. It also meant yellow. It also meant the numeral 4. So let me see if I got this straight. You
Right.
could use the numeral 4 to represent at least 3 different linguistic ideas. Context is everything in this particular language, and that is what the Spanish discovered that they could not wrap their heads around, was the context. And the Mayans, who were trying to help the Spanish learn to speak and write Mayan, gave up because the Spanish could not wrap their heads around multiple contexts for the same word
So
or
it's
even the same sound.
so its meaning was inferred by how what else it was being used in. Is kind of what I'm saying.
Correct.
Now, did they speak this way too?
We think so. I don't know. I don't speak Mayan. And anybody who's speaking Mayan in a modern setting
Is just,
probably is not speaking it the same way they use
yeah,
it then.
they're sort of they're just they're guessing because no one knows for sure because there isn't one here to
Well,
tell us, right? It's not recorded. We
well,
don't.
yes and no. I mean, for instance, you go try to speak, go try to read some of the Old English literature, the Miller's Tale in the original Old English.
Right. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. Is this even the same language? Right.
It, yeah. Um, so to say that they're doing it wrong, I can't say that. I'm just saying it's different. It has evolved. It's some meanings are hell. We don't even know exactly some of the meanings in our own Constitution, which is only what 233,
Yeah.
236 years old.
Yep.
Uh, the pursuit of happiness has nothing to do with being happy. It has everything to do with what job do you want to do. We're not going to conscript you to be a sailor in the English Navy.
Again,
That's what that's for.
it's contextual. Sure, you got to sort of
Yes,
put yourself in that time and that mindset of what those people were going through, and then you infer what they meant. Not if you try to translate it with modern context, it won't make any sense.
correct. And that is true at so many levels on so many things. So we have the known Roman method, and we have the inferred, if you will, Mayan method. And they each, believe it or not, had elements of this symbol means these words, or the same symbol means these numerals. In Roman numerals, well, you can make their numerals easily in their 5 by 5 system. Make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
However, you have to tell the receiver, hey, this next batch is numerical. And then it works. If you don't tell them that, it's nonsense.
Okay.
And I'm sure that the same is true for the Mayan system that, one day maybe if I live long enough and get close enough to some of the sources, I can figure out exactly how they did it. But the Romans, like I said, we got keystroke by keystroke. We can duplicate it. A 7-year-old can duplicate it.
Okay.
So now
Very
let's
easy
take all
system.
that.
Yeah.
Let's
Very
take all
simple.
that. Let's go back to the Lafayette cipher. What the French and everybody who tried to break it called the Grand Cipher. And this is in chapter 4 of my book for the most part. Thomas Jefferson, having been to France for a while as ambassador, and having been a personal friend of Lafayette, and having made sure that Lafayette, you know, wasn't beheaded or anything like that, and later on helped him get out of prison in Austria. Anyway, big long story. Lafayette told Jefferson how to use a grand cipher. Jefferson became president of the United States. He moves Meriwether Lewis into the White House with him for 2 years as his personal secretary. At the end of that 2 years, Meriwether Lewis joins up with William Clark and heads west with a corps of soldiers because they were employed by the United States, not as the United States Army because that did not yet exist. It was the Corps of Discovery, and they were privates and sergeants and, well, lieutenant and captain. It's supposed to be 2 captains, but the structure did not allow for 2 captains to be paid as captains. Anyway, Jefferson sent a letter with Lewis that said, if you find something of dire consequence or potential dire consequence to the sovereignty, not security, sovereignty of the United States, his wording, you must send back a coded message and send it back by whatever means works, including natives. And they did that. We don't know the content of that message, and we probably never will. But we do have most of the journals that survived from Lewis and Clark's and the Corps of Discovery's expedition.
Mm-hmm.
In those journals, we have examples of everybody except Lewis making interesting messages that have unusual use of numerals and written out numerical values, 1 O N E or 1 as a numeral, throughout some of their messages. And we have a number of days because all the journals are dated by day. There was one day when they're along the Missouri River and they come across this skeleton that's 45 feet long. All the sergeants who are keeping journals, it was 45 feet long. Then they go into other messages about how it will be sent back to Washington City, as they called it, because it wasn't called the District of Columbia at that time. And in not only that date, but there were a bunch of dates where they did this odd combination of numericals and written out words. And my contention is they were learning to use the grand cipher in case both the officers died for some reason. Maybe the sergeants could carry on and record whatever was necessary and get the word back to Jefferson. There's a lot more to that story, but my contention is Jefferson had given that Corps of Discovery its own key, cipher key.
Yeah.
And each of the members, officers and sergeants, were to learn how to use it. Initially, it was probably just the officers, Lewis and Clark. And then and right after Lewis got shot in the ass, they decided maybe it was a good idea for other people to know how to use the cipher.
Now, are we talking like a tradition? When you say cipher, are we talking about like what they call the Mason cipher type level stuff, which is converting letters into symbols, and
No, in
then
that case, it's converting syllables into a numeral.
okay. Oh, you did say
That's
it was numeric, right? Where they would literally write the number 1, some of
right.
them, and things like. Okay, I got you. Go ahead.
So the whole story is going to Jefferson had used this system with a lot of different correspondents. And I can find no evidence that all these correspondents were using the same or even knew of the other correspondents, knew the same cipher, you used the same key. My contention is that Jefferson, being the genius that he was, he assigned a key to each different correspondent, and he could keep in his head what correspondent was using what key.
I wouldn't doubt it. Absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't
Now,
doubt
that
it.
doesn't mean he kept all the keys in his head. He just kept had a logical system of, okay, this guy over here, let's say it's Alexander Hamilton. He's getting his key from this book.
And this is important, right? Because just to make sure that, because I understand what you're saying. When you have a cipher, there's generally a key or keyword, for instance, that is applied. That once you apply this key, it lines all of the other letters up numerically where they're supposed to be. So without the key, you don't know necessarily how to line these things up. You could try millions of options until something made sense, and you can do that with modern computers very quickly now, right? But back then, you had to have that key because without it, everything fell apart.
Yeah, you
So
still have to have the key for this one.
it could have been as simple as their first name or something. We don't know, what he used, but it would have been something it'd be easy to
it wouldn't have been
manage.
like that. It would have been, let's say, for instance, you know the movie National Treasure?
Yep.
Nicolas Cage movie. Okay.
Yep.
In that movie, they went and they found Benjamin Franklin's letters, and they discovered through these letters that certain letters in the letter in the letters to the editor, in a code, would spell out the name of the next place to go look for clues. Remember that part?
Yep.
Okay. In Jefferson's system, the real world, not the movie, it would have been something like, go look at the book of Exodus, okay? And go through the first, whatever it is, 500 or so syllables, and that is your key. Go look in nobody ever found a Bible at Monticello, incidentally. So it probably was not a book of the Bible. But some book, it might have been Gulliver's Travels. There's actually a reason I bring that one up. Let's say it was Gulliver's Travels. It was a key. Then if the numerical sequence was, say 511, 16, 339, then you would go through and find those three syllables to make your first word.
Wow.
And there would be a word separator.
Yeah.
So that's how complex it is. And you had to have the exact key, meaning if it was a different edition, it might be a different key.
Okay. So it was involved. It wasn't something that was very quick to do. Then
right.
when you
and
get
it
this
wasn't
message,
something that a machine could ever do, not even in this day and age, because, well, you can't guess that well.
right?
You can't guess what book it is, let alone what edition it is, unless you have an ISBN number.
It would have
So
to be
anyway,
something though they all had access to. So that does
correct.
narrow
Well,
does narrow it a
it
little
would have
bit.
had been something that particular correspondent and Jefferson had access to. There's only
Yeah, that
two
makes
people
sense.
need that same one.
Right. That does make sense. Yeah, it would just be those two who had access to.
Remember, after the War of 1812, Jefferson donated his library to Congress, and it was more books than they'd had before.
So maybe maybe they were all ciphers. It was a book per person.
Maybe.
Who knows? Yeah, he was a genius though. It was a very fascinating man nonetheless. But anyway,
Right.
I digress. I don't want to take you off topic. Go ahead.
So the whole cipher and line of sight signaling thing took me down yet another path. And how did they do it here? Because the Mayan civilization was contemporary with both the very beginning, the very end of the Adena and beginning of Hopewell, right up into early Mississippian. It really was. Maya was.
Okay.
Rome wasn't. Welsh weren't. Vikings certainly weren't. No. There's,
I think.
but North America had analogs and contemporaries to all of those Central and South American systems. And we know beyond any shadow of a doubt that at least by the early Mississippian age, there was long distance travel between the middle Mississippi Valley and the Yucatan Peninsula.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that my wife just pointed this out to me the other day that there's a pigment that they found in like paint or something that only comes from Alabama, but they found
Georgia.
Georgia. That's it. Yep, and they found it down in South America.
Well, they
So
found it in Mayan Yucatan. It's called Maya blue, in fact.
yep,
Uh, but it's the only mineral deposit that has been discovered. Not saying it can't exist. It's the only one that's been discovered from which they could get that particular mineral to make that particular enamel, if you will, or glaze on pottery. And they also did it as loose paint in frescoes and whatnot.
so this was something that was used a lot. Not like it was just withheld for royalty or anything like that, right? It was common, which would indicate that
Well,
there was a lot more
it was
travel.
kind of high end pottery. I mean, it wasn't your day to day flatware kind of or servingware kind of thing.
It was grandma's china, huh?
Yeah, it's grandma's fine china. That's right. That's the best analog I can think of. But that doesn't mean it was the king's fine china. It wasn't that elite. It wasn't that uncommon. It wasn't that only royalty. There was another product, commodity in this case, that actually went the other way. It went from the Yucatan and Central, even into South America, up into North America. In fact, pretty much from the desert Southwest to North Florida up into Wisconsin.
That makes sense because even truckers today don't like the dead leg, right? So if you're going up,
Correct.
bring something back. Yep.
Right. And that product is cocoa, cacao, we call it. They called it. We don't. We generally think of it as chocolate. They did not. They thought of it as an adult beverage because it was fermented cacao.
Okay.
And it gets even more interesting because the pottery that held that particular residue of cacao, beer, whatever it is, mead, the pottery is found in sites like I mentioned from North Florida to South Central Wisconsin to Arizona, and the pottery all looks the same. It's like when you see this glass bottle, it has a figure eight, like a woman's figure,
It was
and
like their
and
version of Coca-Cola or Pepsi or something like that,
it's
right?
like their right. It's their version of branding.
Wow. Marketing.
Yes, exactly that. And it lasted for hundreds of years. And remember, this is, in theory, uh, a consumable object, a consumable product, but it's also a perishable product. That means they didn't take years to transport this.
Oh,
Weeks.
sure. Right. They didn't have modern, well, we're assuming they didn't have any form of refrigeration or anything that would have prolonged its life. It would have, right, it
Correct.
would have a shelf life.
Correct. It has a shelf life. And unless it had a really good seal, it would not have been a long shelf life because it's alcohol, it'll evaporate out.
Right.
But it came in that pottery. Now, there's another analog to that, and that is the Roman amphora or Greek amphora. They delivered wine in these very specifically product designed containers. And if you want to follow where the Romans and the Greeks and everybody else sailed, you look on the bottom of the ocean for the line of empties, just like they were empty beer cans.
Sure. Right.
Like around Oak Island, as an example. But getting back to the Maya exporting cocoa, by the time Cortez got into Mexico, Montezuma was drinking so much of it a day that, well, he was a drunk, but he was a drunken king. And that was part of the reason they were able to just waltz in and take over. But the amount of cocoa that they consumed was also a status symbol. The elite got to drink this cocoa liquor.
Okay.
The elite in Cahokia got to drink this cocoa liquor. The elite in Crystal River, Florida got to drink this cocoa liquor. And by the way, theirs was fresher, which tells me it went by water, not by land.
That's
So
fascinating because you're basically. I've always asked that question. I wonder what future civilizations are going to think when they look through our landfills and see all of these soda cans and things, like. And now we kind of already have an answer to that, right? They use the trash to figure out what we're using, basically the trash of these civilizations to figure out what they were doing,
correct.
and to look at their
Well,
trends
right
and
now that's the
things.
only option we have for United States-based cultural remains because you can't dig anything else than trash. And if you find anything besides trash, you got to quit digging and call somebody in.
Oh, they keep that
That's
all. That's yeah, it's all locked up under.
NAGPRA, Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which is a double-edged sword, by the way, if you happen to be a native, because part of the native tradition is to go through and renew your acquaintances with your ancestors, and that might include carving symbols or something into a rock or whatever, which is a felony under NAGPRA, even if you are a native.
Of course it is. Oh my god. Insult to injury, right? Jiminy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Of course, but it's all for the common good. So
Suppose, yeah, but that also brings up why does the government, and we haven't gotten into that yet, why does the government so actively deny and obscure this evidence?
well, I mean, isn't the cat's kind of out of the bag on all this stuff, isn't it? At least, I mean,
No,
or maybe
no,
I'm.
it's not. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. We start with that whole history thing. And none of this has been written down until, well, me and a few other folks started doing it. So, but we're not, I am not, a few of the others are, not in the academia realm where this counts. I am a lot more like a guy by the name of John Wesley Powell. He was a major in the U.S. Army, lost an arm at Shiloh. He was the first guy to descend the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. He did it, oh, by the way, with one arm because he lost his arm at Shiloh. Um, and when he got done with that, they said, "What? You didn't take a photographer? Get your ass back out there, dude." And he did with a photographer
And do
this
it
time. So,
again, right?
yeah, go down the Colorado River with your one good arm again and get us some damn pictures. And he did. Then he was propelled into the role of the second director of the USGS, United States Geological Survey, with zero formal training in any of it, I might add. He attended Oberlin College in Illinois. He attended Illinois University briefly. He never got a degree from any place that we can find out. He did receive an honorary doctorate from a foreign university in a country he never visited.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um, and contemporary with his position at the USGS, he wrote the paper to establish, wrote his own letter of writ, if you will, to establish the Bureau of Ethnicity at the basically brand new at that time, Smithsonian Institution. So he was double hatted for a while. He was running the USGS and he was running the Bureau of Ethnicity, archaeology for the United States. So these two paths crossed with the railroads. In his day and time, he got to tell the railroads where to put their tracks, where to put their rail yards, where to put their stations. And in at least 3 cases, he deliberately had them destroy sites. Those railroads did not need to be there. They needed to be elsewhere, and he knew that.
What was the motivation for that? Why what even that far back? Was it because it posed a threat to, like you were saying, sovereignty and show
Correct.
and so that's what this okay, so boy, I took you way off track, but that's why you were giving so much emphasis to that in that letter was anything that challenged the sovereignty of the
Correct.
United States, right?
It,
So
and because Jefferson was an attorney first, a politician way second. He was an attorney
He
for them.
didn't want another country coming in and saying, we already settled that land, so that land actually belongs to us, not this new country you're trying to form, kind of
That's
thing.
exactly right. That's exactly how he would have thought. And he, in the middle of all, at the beginning of the Lewis and Clark expedition, Lewis took a side trip to St. Louis, Missouri to sign over the Louisiana Purchase. Remember, they were going to explore their new purchase?
Right.
Except that Lewis had been training for this for 2 years.
I've heard about this, that he had like an ulterior mission. There was he wasn't just out doing cartography or that's not all they were doing, right? The mission was to go find the other coast, wasn't it? But
That was the
there was like
main
a
part. Not just to go find it, but also to go and build a fort on that coast and man that fort for a given period of time to fulfill the legal requirements
yeah.
to have established a colony.
That's why it was so important. The sovereignty issue was so big for him at that time.
Right.
Oh,
So the whole question of what did Jefferson expect him to find, it would, in the middle of the continent, that would endanger the sovereignty of the then fairly well brand new United States. Now remember, they spent a winter in the Mandan village. I don't know how familiar you are with the whole expedition. They overwintered in the Mandan village.
no, yeah, I'm not familiar.
Okay, the Mandans, now extinct, they used round boats that looked exactly like the coracles of Wales. They were rumored to be descendants of Welsh. They had words in their language separate from the Siouan language all around them that were identical in meaning and sound to Welsh words. They had blue eyes, they had blonde hair or green eyes, blonde or red hair, freckles, and it's just a very interesting coincidence that Jefferson knew they might be a problem.
Yeah, and why? Right.
Right.
Why was that? Because this was a land that should have been, and I'm saying this, in air quotes, that was the savage land, right? So there shouldn't have been
Yeah.
anything out there. But why was he sending these people out specifically on this expedition? He had to know something for sure.
Yeah. Not only did he have to know something, he had to have reason to believe it could be a problem for the country. Now, going with that for just a moment, if you've ever been around a lot of native people, blonde hair, blue eyes, while they are, or gray eyes, green eyes, anything besides dark brown eyes. It's not impossible, but it's very, very rare. And yet here was a population where it was dominant. So that was already, and somehow Jefferson already knew that. He'd never been west of the Mississippi. In fact, he'd only once been west of the Allegheny Mountains. Um, but he'd been all over France. He'd been through England a couple times. And he knew all the tales. And, oh, by the way, he had friends in high places in France. And France had occupied this territory for almost 100 years before the Americans ever got there. They told Franklin to make sure not to let Isle Royal go when you negotiate the peace line at the Paris Treaty with England. Do not let them have that. They said, okay. They didn't know why. Now we know that it had the world supply of pure copper.
Okay.
Had like 18 million pounds of 98% pure copper.
Yeah, and I mean, if he was staring, he was looking at these as national assets,
They
and
were.
yeah,
They were definitely national assets. Now, going back to why somebody like a Welsh or any, very specifically, any Christian population that has existed in North America or in what was then the United States could matter. Why did that matter? It all goes back to a very specific legal document called Terra Nullius, Terranullis, Terra Nullius, in Latin, empty lands. And it was a papal bull issued in, I believe it was 1458, saying basically, hey, any of you Christian conquerors, you go out there and you find lands that are empty of Christians, well, you can have the lands and you can kill all the people if you want to, or enslave them or what, because they're not Christians and they don't matter.
Wow, it's brutal, but it's so true, isn't it?
I paraphrased it, but that's what it says. So Jefferson knew this. And he also knew that if there had been, when the Spanish or the French or the English before the U.S. got here, when they got here, if there had been a Christian colony or a Christian population, then all of those land claims are null and void.
That
In
makes
practicality, there's nothing we can do about it now. But in 1803, they could have.
so they would have had what he would have considered to be like just cause to contest the ownership of these natural resources, basically that he was trying to get put in the asset column for the new United States.
Right. He also would. Another thing that he had Lewis looking for was live populations of elephants.
Okay, I didn't
And
know that.
he also had Lewis excavate a, a mammoth skeleton. This one was in southern Ohio along the Ohio River, and had it sent back to Washington. However, it and its boat went down in the Mississippi before it ever got out of the mouth of New Orleans. So he sent a different expedition later that got one from Big Bone Lick in Kentucky. The, there, the reason he wanted to know if there were still live elephants or, something like them, because ivory was precious,
Oh,
still
sure.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes
So
sense.
resources, yes. The French in 1729 had excavated a full skeleton of a mammoth at Big Bone, what is now Big Bone Lick. They had a different name for it. And it is still on display in Paris.
So, is the motivation here then? Am I putting this together right? And correct me where I'm wrong, okay, for sure. But then the motivation here is that there was a specific version of American history that's been written and propagated. Not only that, but enforced, like you're saying, through Jefferson and putting, and then people, them destroying historical sites by putting rail yards and things like that right on top of them. And it's all been motivated by trying to keep the United States' sovereignty without being questioned, kind of thing. And
Uh,
that's why that there's been this systemic issue of sort of patting this stuff down and hiding it. Um,
th- that is my contention.
okay,
And
so
I
that
can show several examples.
okay,
Um, and I do talk about several of them in the book, but I've discovered many more since the book. I mean, seriously, the book's been out there, what, 8 years?
I mean that
Almost 8 years.
I mean I can kind of empathize with a person that would be put in that position that would do that. Okay, and I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. What I'm saying is here's a person that's saying newly founded country, could come apart at the seams at any point in time. We need resources. We need, and was kind of thinking along those lines. Thus, sort of did these things, and for those reasons. However, that has kind of uh, polluted real discovery and real historical sort of research, and because it set sort of a mindset that anything outside this scope was somehow fake.
Right.
And
And going back to John Wesley Powell, in those dual-headed positions, he was writing paper after paper after paper with zero background in any of this stuff. But he was making these dictates of, hey, if you find this, don't pay any attention to it because the natives didn't know how to write. If it looks like writing, it's probably a hoax. So that is still what's going on. And you, because we're talking about Scott and America and Earth, if you find a piece of writing, a petroglyph, and it has any characters other than a few scratches or maybe some hand symbols, it's got to be a fake. Well, really? Why? Why does it have? Are you telling me that systemically you believe the Native Americans were completely stupid, or that they just had never invented anything of their own? Well, we know better. Powell did not want us to know better.
right,
So whatever is in the literature is the history. That's kind of the point of, if it's not written, it's not history. If it is written, it's taken as history, even if it's wrong. That
but
could include my book. I don't care.
okay. but
But
that's by like academia that we're talking about, or institutionalized history, for
and law
sure. And
and
yeah,
law.
yeah, I'll give you that. Absolutely. Yeah. So where it counts, unfortunately,
Exactly.
right. Right.
Sad but true. Yes.
Because I know that there's, I mean, now, okay, not at all involved. I love these subjects, but not involved. Okay, I like to read about them and learn about them and things like that. But from my side of the fence, or from my outside observance of it, it seems to me that we're rewriting history all over the damn place. Not just in the United States, but I mean literally everywhere. From what's going on there in Gobekli Tepe and like all over the place. All of these premises that we've accepted were accurate timelines are being challenged, right? So I just assumed in the United States the same thing's happening here because it seems to be happening everywhere. But if
Well,
academia and stuff is
the saddest part to me is it's happening at an accelerated pace. Uh, it has happened ever since there's been civilization.
okay,
The oldest piece of writing we have is the Epic of Gilgamesh, Sumeria,
right,
right? Um, then then we move on up into quote unquote history, where other things were written that contradicted some of the things that were in the Epic of Gilgamesh. But one of the things that's not contradicted is, hey, there was this giant flood.
right. That exists in so many cultures, history, ancient history, sure.
Right, but that is not an acceptable argument for academia. We don't care how many sources there are; they're all wrong.
I thought geology supported that too.
In some regards, it does, but in other regards, it doesn't. And the hard science, even the hard sciences, have very confusing pieces of evidence in some places. Just like the mammoth that's 130,000 years old in association with tools. It's like the geologists are trying to work with the archaeologists who are saying, no, you can't be right. Get out of
That's one of the things that I had Neil Thompson on a couple shows ago, right? And he's man, that guy has just blown my mind too, in the sense that he said, look, you got to start looking at the ancient stories, like the fights between the gods, and Sherfu's always talking about this too. About why do they have these stories? They're not even moral. What are they? And you got to start reinterpreting these kind of through the lens of the time and what they were looking at and saying, right? So that wouldn't surprise me that that's the case here as well.
Well, I'll give you another example of how fast this is accelerating.
Okay.
Um, we have in our quote unquote recent history a civil war. It's only been 52 years,
Yeah.
154
Yeah.
years now since that war ended.
3 people ago, right? Not very long ago.
Well, 4 generations. Call it 4 generations, if you will.
Okay.
And then we've got these accounts written on this side of the line that contradict the accounts written on the other side of the line about the same battle.
Right.
Including who won, or how many people were lost, or what territory was won or lost, or how the battle sequenced. And yet they were both there. Who's right?
Right.
Well, we don't know until we go out and we find evidence that, hey, you know what? There was a cannon right here matching this account. We know that because, well, there's dead powder kegs and an unspent ball and various things, buttons, whatever supports the idea that yes, there was a cannon in this exact spot. I bring that one up because also on Lookout Mountain there was a cannon overlooking an approach that held a Union contingent in place for whatever it was, 8 days. And the old joke, hey, it's a trick. There's two of them. Well, there were two. There were two guys with this cannon on this mountain,
Okay.
and they held a small army in place for days. And the North account is different from the diary account of one of those two guys. And yet, it's been about 18 years ago now, somebody found the damn cannon in the exact spot that it is in that diary.
So
Now,
that corroborates, right?
It corroborates the diary account. The Union officer account was, oh no, that's not why we stopped. We had to get provisions and a whole bunch of bullshit reasons that he gave for stopping for 8 days in his progress.
Right. Yeah, and you'd mentioned.
It,
Go ahead.
another one. It goes back 2,300, almost 2,300. Uh, uh, Africanus going to Carthage. He stops for 100 days. No, I'm sorry. He stops for 31 days to fight a 100-foot serpent.
Okay, that sounds like a dragon, right, or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
Scipio Africanus. It's right there in his notes back to Rome. It's like somehow I think he went to a whorehouse instead.
Yeah, I
Just
might.
saying.
Right, I'm feeling a hey, we're gonna party and we're gonna blame it on something.
Yeah.
Or who knows? I mean, depending on where he was, he could have got some of those, interesting mushrooms or something, and he thought he actually fought a big serpent for 30
Well, he was
days.
in Libya, so it was probably CAC.
There you
But
go.
yeah,
Right.
uh, but yeah, there are accounts that don't match anything in history or logic. Um, I should say don't match other accounts of the same history or logic, and yet they're accepted within academia as being the written history. A diary is not a history. I beg your pardon. It's a personal history,
Sure. Right. Especially a diary. I mean,
especially a diary. Yes.
I mean
A
that's a
friend of mine turned me on to a diary of a guy who was a scout for John Hunt Morgan's campaign. And the scout, well, he actually bugged out about an hour before Morgan was captured. He said, "Sir, my other scouts and I are going to go look for an escape route for the entire army to leave the North, and you can come with us or you can follow us." He didn't manage to do either, but they did. Um, and that diary remained hidden for 147 years, 137 years before it was finally published by a great grandson or whoever it was. It was found in an attic. It's a real diary of a real account of the entire Morgan raid into the North. Uh, and it does not describe a small band of raiders crossing the Ohio. It describes basically 18,000 men and two parrot guns crossing the Ohio. It took them 6.5 hours on two ferry boats and under fire. Briefly, they were under fire. Then they turned that gunboat back around and it went back to Louisville.
So it's history is written by the victors, mostly, right? Those in
Right.
power write
And
history.
occasionally we get a little gem like that diary that says, yeah, caught you.
So when you finished or when you decided to start taking this journey of going down this road, I mean, what motivated you to start doing this kind of research? Because this is not your occupation was different than doing historical research, right?
Well, it was different than historical research, but the historical context helped me in my then real world. Before I retired from the government, I was I had spent the last 6 years actually working in direct support of U.S. SOCOM contingents. That would be the Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, uh, Air Force Commandos. I also got farmed out to foreign NATO friendly countries. And my area of expertise was lasers for target designation and target marking and range finding and all that stuff, and night vision and how all those things work together
Okay.
and how they would guide munitions. Therefore, I had to have some knowledge about the munitions themselves.
Okay.
But in the foreign countries in particular, I got to put a lot of it into historical perspective of, they used to protect this coast with rocks.
For sure. Yeah.
And I actually got to go to some of those places where a rock won a battle. Now, granted, the rock was thrown by something other than a man, but still, it was a thrown rock. At Masada, in Israel,
Right.
the Romans sieged that hill for what, 3.5 years? And part of that siege involved a thing called a ballista. And a ballista was basically a catapult that would throw a rock, in that case, about a quarter of a mile. And that rock weighed 100 pounds
Yeah.
that they could throw a quarter of a mile.
God. It's like man-made created asteroids basically slamming into your fortress, right? That's what
Yeah,
I heard that story too. When the Romans pushed into the north, they built a bridge, and the people that they were about to invade just surrendered basically out of watching these people build a bridge. They were like, "Yeah,
well,
okay, we
they
give up."
retreated. I don't know they surrendered. No, they did not surrender. That's
Okay,
not.
I
They
well, I'm,
retreated.
I'm making
But
stuff up. Sure,
no,
I do that
actually,
sometimes.
the incident is true, and it was Julius Caesar's army. It was, and part of it was the Ninth Legion, incidentally. Um, they built a bridge across the Rhine River, which is at that point a little wider than the Ohio at your point, and they built that bridge in 10 days. And they crossed an army across the Ohio River with dry feet in 10 days.
Yeah,
That made all the Germans, in that case, yeah, the Germans, Huns, whatever they were, barbarians, to retreat. And Julius Caesar said, it's a victory because there's nobody here to beat up on.
right. That's the same thing, right? You seize the land, it's
And it,
yours.
right. So they went back into Gaul and they dismantled the bridge as they went because they didn't want the Huns using it, or the barbarians.
Yeah, to come back. Sure.
Right. And then 3 or 4 years later, I don't remember the exact interval, but they went and did it again in a slightly different place. But this time it only took them 4 days to build a bridge across the Rhine River. And then I look at Louisville and they're getting ready to close the Sherman Benson Bridge again. And they're expecting 4 or 5 years of repairs, not even building a new bridge.
right. Yeah. Hey, Julius Caesar did it in less than a week. What's your problem, right?
Yeah. And they had to cut down all the timbers to do it. I mean, it wasn't like they took,
right.
it wasn't prefab. It was pre-designed, but it wasn't prefab. When
Now,
they went to build a fortress, a palisade,
right.
each Roman legionnaire had his job. He was going to cut so many logs this length, notched this way, and then they were all going to converge and and they could do that in a day and a half and house 5,500 people inside this wall
Yeah, nuts.
if there was adequate timber.
Yeah, they were fantastic at siege, weren't they? They would starve you out. They just surround you and shut off all your supplies, or they would build. Where was it that they just built this enormous ramp? And by the time they
But
got
that
to
was
up to the
Masada, yeah.
okay, right, and everybody killed themselves right before they even got there, or something like that, wasn't
Well,
it?
I'm not sure that's exactly true. That's another
Okay,
one of those victors wrote the history, and
okay,
yet some of the Jews had a little different history. They had a different view on that. Most of them died before there was ever any kind of a suicide. There were only 17 of them left when the wall actually fell, or when the Romans actually walked in.
okay.
And, and that's how many bodies they found. Well, there had been thousands of people inside that fortress. Where the hell did they go?
Oh, was it
You know,
cannibalism
they
or
didn't.
something?
Yeah, they
Ugh.
did. No, there were not. There weren't even any bones. These people were just gone.
Yeah, that's
There was a
interesting. Did they
there was a tunnel or something.
something they got out, right?
Yeah,
And the people that stayed back made enough noise to make the army think that there was still a bunch of people in there. Was
don't
sort of
do it.
their
It's a
job.
trick. There's two of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, when you're not chasing writing books and write because you're writing I interrupted you from writing an article here recently, right? Today you're writing a new article for a magazine. So, what else do you do in addition to being an author and a book writer?
Um, well, let's see. I cut firewood. Um,
Manly stuff, for sure.
manly stuff. Yeah, feed 4 horses and 8 chickens and a couple rabbits and 3 dogs, 4 cats. Um, soon to be 15 grandchildren. Uh,
Congratulations.
yeah, I try to sleep in between some of that stuff.
And you moderate a website too, right? That's
A couple of them,
yeah,
actually. Yeah, ancientamerica.com.
right.
It's had no new entries for a while, and I have to change that. And also another one that has no new entries for a good while is called The Hollow Earth Insider, or THEI. So it's thehollowearthinsider.com or thei.us. And it is what it says. It's Hollow Earth based site or conspiracy theory or all the above.
Okay.
And both of those are getting pretty good visit numbers. Had 3 million for 2018 on THEI and almost 4 million on Ancient America. So,
Well, I got to have you. Well, I would love to have you come back too and do more of these for sure. But I would love to also kind of get you to come on periodically and do like conspiracy theory updates because I love good conspiracies and conspiracy theories and things like that. And I know that that those constantly evolve. Um, so I'm,
they
I'm
do.
so I'm assuming there's some stuff you could probably elaborate on that'd be really interesting. Type how like I said these conspiracies have evolved and things like that. And I know you're a stickler for data and uh, and things like that as well. So if you'd be interested in that, I guess open invitation. I'd like to have you come and do some of that stuff too.
I would be happy to do that.
Now if we
As you can probably tell, I don't have a problem with talking.
No, man, you've been great. You're perfect at this. Now, you had a radio show or something at one point in time too, or as
Had
well, did you not?
Yep, hosted the Oopa Loopa Cafe. Oopa being an acronym for out of place artifact, and Lupa being large out of place artifact. Things like Viking ships in the middle of Minnesota.
Right. Okay.
Um, didn't find any of those yet, but I think they're there. Um, yeah, did that one for years. In fact, started in 2000. Well, let's see. I started a blog in 2007. Started the radio show. I believe it was in 2008. Then started another radio show called Unraveling the Secrets in 2009, and it ran for 3 years. I was doing about 8 hours of broadcast or recording a week, and as you can well imagine, that is tiring,
Yeah. It's hard to be on
fatiguing.
for that long at a time, isn't
It
it?
is. And then later on, I did a little cable cast TV version of the Oopa Loopa Cafe, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, and that one almost killed me. And I'm not being figurative here. It almost killed me. Just too much fatigue.
Yeah. What's one of the things? Have you ever considered podcasting, or do you podcast at all?
I did a lot of podcasting, yeah,
Okay.
both on YouTube until they changed all the rules on me,
Yeah.
uh, and tried a couple other sites. Did live stream for a while, and they changed all the rules on
Yeah.
me.
That's one of the good
You
things. I run into this because I travel a lot for work, right? So, one of the great things about doing podcasts is you can just kind of do them whenever you feel like it. You know what I
Yep,
mean? They're very easy to put together that in that regard because you don't have a network or a schedule that's always pressing on you. I like it for that reason because I
yep,
don't just put shows out just because, right? So I think
right.
it makes the content
I
better.
don't produce stuff to have 2 hours of content. No, I have content that I can usually fill 2 hours with pretty easily,
Right.
or 10 or 15. It's just where do you stop?
Right. Oh, for sure. For sure. That's why I mean if I am my wife and I have this phrase we call it Conspiracy Friday, and it's when we throw on Ancient Aliens and sit there and watch Ancient because they have like a marathon of it, so we call it Conspiracy
Yeah.
Friday. But I said I'm going to integrate that into the show, and I want to start doing kind of not a every week type thing for sure, or anything like that, but I would like to start kind of integrating more of that kind of content, and because I have a lot of people that are really into that stuff, as well, alternative information is the way I kind of look at it. Like I'm not too many conspiracy air quotes theories end up turning out true for, so I don't discount them like a lot of people do. I don't even think of that as a derogatory term. That it automatically makes it not worth you know listening
When
to.
a
Yeah.
conspiracy theory is a solid theory, then you are using science and logic and
Right.
sources to
Right.
support an idea,
Right.
which makes it a science, which makes it conspiriology.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a so that's a dimension I want to add anyway, and I think you'd be great for that given the other stuff that you do. So, have we covered everything about? I mean, I know we went in pretty deep on the book for a solid hour, but was there anything that we left out of there that you wanted to hit, or if there's anything, is there anything else that we want to promote for you, like any other websites or anything like that you're working with?
Well, those are the two main websites, ancientamerica.com and thehollowworthinsider.com. And you mentioned that I'm writing for Ancient American Magazine. The one I'm working on is number 19 in a series. So there's, it's going back, I don't know, 20 odd issues, because I try to get one every issue. Missed a couple in a while. In the last few years, I've missed 2 issues.
Okay.
Let's see, what else? I guess that's pretty much my gamut at the moment. I can still investigate new sites all the time.
Okay.
We mentioned a lot about the book, and we never got to the line of sight stuff that's here, and it's extensive.
Oh,
so
well,
maybe we'll do another show just about that.
Okay, we can do that for sure. Absolutely. Okay, well, I think that pretty much wraps us up, man. It's been fascinating. Again, a big shout out to Sherfu for making the referral. Thanks a ton, bud. And everybody check him out. It's Blue Lotus Health and Acupuncture, and he's got I've got links in the podcast I've done with him with his white papers and stuff on the Academia website. So give that guy a look-see, because he's just been a wealth of guests and information that's coming this way. Man, I'm so appreciative of it. Check us out, www.noshitcast.com. It's KNOWSHITCAST.com. Links to all the places where you can consume podcast media, either at the bottom on an iDevice or over to the right if you're using an old school computer like I do. Go hit us, get us some likes and subscribes out there, folks. The show's growing like crazy, so I appreciate it and all the feedback from everyone out there. And thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you all next time. Bye, Sickles. That's how we do it, man.